My name is Bill Cloud. My mom and dad were charter members of the church when it began in '54. When it was built in '55, I have a brother who was also a charter member along with myself. And I got another brother that was not, and then two sisters. While we were all in Clarksville, in and out over the years, I mean, we were all members of the church, the whole family. Mom and Dad were, the officers in '54 through goodness knows when, Skip. Even though I was a charter member, I was quite young, and so other than that, right now, I guess I'm the only one of the family that is, still an active member of Hilldale.
How old were you when you started?
I was 11 years old when they started this in 1954, when they had the meeting. I wasn't at the meeting that started it down at Madison Street, but I was at an organizational meeting later on out here with a group of people. I don't know how many. I think ultimately there were 134 people that went on the roll when it was determined at the last of 64. 54. So I've been a member of the church technically since 1954.
What do you remember about those early meetings prior to chartering?
Very, very little. Like I said, I was 11, and most of us youth were not really involved in it other than explained, I think, by our parents that we were going to be part of a new church out in this area. If you'll remember, some of them will remember that this area right here was the outer reaches of Clarksville at the time. They just built a new hospital where the shopping center is now, and we were right on the edge of the city limits. A lot of people, a lot of the members were into the Dogwood area, and in the Beach Haven and so forth, came from that area, even all the way out to around McAdoo Creek where Dr. George Grice lived out there, who became our first chairman of the board. But it was an idea of just creating a church in this new area because they didn't have one.
What do you remember about the organizational meeting when you finally met? There's a photograph of you all.
The one at Moore School?
Right. You got the smirk on your face.
Do what?
You got a smirky grin on your face in the photograph.
Well, at 11 years old, I'm sure that people likes of Bobby Johnson, Lewis Johnson, myself, my brother, and some of the others at that age were just, wondering what's going on. And that meeting at Moore School was just, typical teenager, typical, what's happening here. I remember us meeting at Moore School and using the classrooms of the Moore School for Sunday school classes and so forth. Vaguely remember, just the process of building, because Dad was involved in that, and along with Lewis Johnson, Wilson Goodrich, George Grice, all those, always checking on when they finally broke ground here to build this church. But as a teenager, I was more interested in other things, football and girls, probably.
What do you remember? Who was your Sunday school teacher?
I don't remember. When you asked me to do this, I can't remember who they were. I just really couldn't remember because, Miss Bibb, Mother, the elders of the church, kind of swapped around doing things like that and helping us out. The parents, a different set of parents each year or each quarter, something like that, would take care of the youth group. And so there wasn't any one person that you went with, but just like we do somewhat now, the parents fed us for our youth group, and we'd come up here and some days I'd rather be on the lake, but we weren't large, so it was very stretched on who did things and so forth.
As an 11-year-old, what grade were you in?
I believe I was in the 8th grade. hadn't thought back to that. Let's see. We were meeting at Moore School. I can remember that we were looking out at Moore School, out the windows out there, and there was a big fire across the railroad tracks into what is now the Summit Heights. And we were all worried about that fire. You know, eventually our house was set on fire, and that was in 54 or 55 maybe. I didn't bring those dates with me, and so we were very evident there was a firebug moving in our neighborhood. So sometime in that, okay, I can't give you exactly.
Were you present on groundbreaking for this facility?
I was.
What do you remember about groundbreaking?
I remember all those old folks in front of me, you know, putting those shovels in the ground and going from there, and you know, they had a vision. I didn't see that vision at the time. Probably a lot of people didn't see that vision at the time of what this would become. And, you know, it's pretty extraordinary. Yeah, I've been to churches over the last several years in lay speaking, lay leader for the district that are much, much older than Hilldale. And yet, they're smaller congregations, they're tied, and, Hilldale just, I guess, when I say that you knew something was going on that was important, but you didn't fully understand it, I guess that would be the way to put it.
Did you use the shovel?
No, sir. No, sir. I let Mom and Dad handle the shovel or whoever. Okay. I think it was the board, and I think Dad was one of them. I'm not sure about Mom.
Did they keep the shovel?
You know, I don't know. I would assume so.
I've never seen one. I just wondered.
I don't remember. I don't recall.
So what did it feel like watching the church be built?
It's just an interesting to 11, going on 12-year-old at the time. You come up here with your dad and you do some mowing and stuff like that, and watching it, come out of the ground. And it was fairly interesting. And I guess probably the best feeling I can tell you there is I think all of us would be glad to get out of Moore School and into something more permanent. And watching it being built, and it's very satisfactory.
Were you part of the first worship service that was led by the youth on that sunrise service?
Wow.
Do you remember that? The very first service here.
I think
on this ground.
Yeah, I know what you. I think we all were of of high school age, Skip, in some manner. I don't have a vivid remembrance of that, really. But I think we were so short on numbers as far as youth goes at the time. It pretty much took all of us at the time to have a good group and something going. So, and we had a sunrise service with us, and we had a sunrise service with the older people. I hate to call them older because now I'm old, but it just okay. My wife might not agree with you, but that's all right. And it was it's pretty. Just is a little different because shortly it wasn't long thereafter. Well, of course, what was it? September of '74. We had the first sunrise out here would be first Easter in '75, when there was no church; it was just being built.
Oh, you mean 54 and 55?
Yeah, and so.
You said 74. You meant
54. I'm sorry.
Yeah, 54, 55.
See what age does to you. Okay. Okay. And then of course the next Easter we were in the church. So.
What did it feel like to come in the doors the first time?
After it was complete?
Yeah.
Oh, it was great because I think we're all youth and adults. That's probably better than saying old people. Adults. Adults were glad to get out of Moore School. It served its purpose great. You had the space, and so, but you couldn't organize. You couldn't do anything on any kind of permanent basis. And so to be able to, walk in those doors when the contractor finally turned over to us, it was great. And you could walk through and see where you're going to have a classroom. You could go downstairs and see we had those folding curtains, and where you're going to have your classroom down there, and a great place for all of us to meet and have a potluck, good old Methodist potluck, okay? And man, those ladies could cook. But an interesting note, with this Sunday, Nell sent out said there's going to be a blog about recipes. And I just kind of laughed and chuckled because my mom never used a recipe in her life, I don't think. She knew what she was doing, she knew what she needed, and she just didn't write anything down. So I don't have any recipes of what Mom did. Another thing is with the hot sauce that we use for the barbecue, Dad never wrote anything down. And Judy's kind of, when we got involved later on, Judy's just learned to make that according to Dad's old recipe. And so I'm going to be, I don't know if I can come up with a recipe for the blog. Make one up maybe.
What are some memories you had of those early years in the building, like Christmases? Let's talk about Christmases. Any Christmas memories? Christmas programs? Choir?
Not really, Skip. I know we had a choir, so I'm sure there was a Christmas program. But nothing specific. I just can't remember that.
Any parties?
Huh?
Any parties? Halloween, Easter, 4th of July?
Well, we did. What was it? The youth group would always do UNICEF. Christmas. No, I don't remember any Christmas. One of the earlier things I think was one of the adult groups and so forth did what they call the Dirty Santa Claus type deal. But we had a choir, and we had some pretty good personnel in the choir at the time, and very very committed to music. So the music was always really pretty good. But any particular Easter or Christmas, I can't say anything.
Now, through the years, tell us now, you're in the building, you're now go off to college, and did you come back immediately, or did you get married then come back later? What happened next?
I graduated in '60, so I only had, 5 years here before I left. I didn't leave home, okay, but I went off to college in '60. I returned we returned in '71. I went off and started working on my degree, and then I took 6 months off to go to basic training and boot camp and join the Guard. Let's see, then went back to school, went to work for Union Carbide in Columbia, got married then, and Judy and I went up to Knoxville to go through law school. We were in and out of Clarksville, obviously because my family stayed here, but not as diligent a tie as during that 11-year period as somebody that was here all the time. Coming back in '71, I think, of course, Judy's not from Clarksville. We really kind of met at a engineering picnic at school, and then got to know each other better at Wesley Foundation in Cookeville at Tennessee Tech. So we had church ties, but we weren't strong church ties during that period of time. At the couple of years at Tech, in the latter years, we did go to Wesley quite a bit. And then we kind of got away from the church and came back to Clarksville, and we were wondering about coming back to Hilldale because of Mom and Dad and the kind of the legacy that they had. But ultimately we decided, ultimately I think Mother would have killed me, but if I hadn't. But we came to Hilldale, and we've been here ever since.
I know this is not important, but I think it's hilarious. What was your first thought when you met Judy?
That's a good question. Actually, we were at American Civil Engineers banquet at Tech, or picnic at Tech, and Jim Cruz, who was a member here also later on, and I were always good friends. And he came back. He graduated from Tech and gone on to the Corps. So he came back for the picnic, and we were sitting at the table out there eating and so forth. And this nice-looking young girl comes up. Another boy comes up with her and sits down, and I didn't know her. They introduced themselves, and I didn't get much of it. And I asked somebody later on who that was, and they said that was Judy Jacobs. And she's engaged to that guy she's with. And so we just kind of drove it off until about a year later when she broke up with him.
Well, you told us a phrase one time. I thought you might remember the phrase.
I don't remember. What?
It was something at first sight.
Oh, love at first sight. Well, no, I can't say the real thing. Okay. Love at first sight will suffice.
Okay.
She...
Right now, what did you notice being an outsider in essence? You're away at school, you're back, you're away, you're back, you're away, you're back. When you came back visiting, what did you notice the changes that took place?
Not a lot of physical changes at that point. The physical changes came later on, but we were growing. And we were getting to a point when Vin was the pastor here where we needed more space. If you can envision the sanctuary we're sitting in right now, where the organ is used to be the old pastor's office, and where the piano is used to be the old secretary's office, and we didn't have the stained glass, and there was a sneak hallway between the pastor's office and the back up there. But when we came back, there wasn't much physical change other than there were more people. You could see more people in and out, doing a little bit more things, with the UMW, the men's group, the laity club, just a little bit more activity than there was because of the numbers.
So the church is growing numerically, the church is growing in ministry and activities, and getting stronger in those ways.
It has, very much so, yes, yeah.
Right. Now you mentioned Vin. It was at his time, wasn't it, that y'all began talking about a Christian Life Center?
Vin wanted to build an addition on down there, a gym, a Christian Life Center, something that had classroom space, because we were getting close on classroom space. If you can envision this building stopping where your current office is and then walking out into a carport, realize we didn't have a lot of space to cover Sunday schools and things like that. And he just could see what was going to be needed over the next years. I always accused Vin of putting me in the middle of that one because some of the church just wasn't ready for it. But that's where the seed started to build a Christian Life Center. And look how long it took. Finally when Paul came, we built a Christian Life Center. The gift, Bumpus money was used to refurb this sanctuary. And we got into the stained glass. And putting all the stained glass in, and it takes sometimes a long time for a seed to grow. But when it first started looking, I think it crowded us and what we had to do about it, and go from there.
What do you remember about Ben Binkley?
Not a lot. I remember more about Artie because Artie stayed here. But Ben came in here as a single man and married into the Mannings, and nice guy, thoroughly, a fun guy. And, but, as far as how good a preacher he was in the pulpit, I don't remember. I mean, the only sermons I really remember are the ones he's done when he come back for homecoming. But he did like it. I mean, he liked it here. Other things caused him to move on. But sometimes I'm kind of like with the Navy. Sometimes they just don't kind of do the right thing necessarily, and I think it was a little different than him coming into a church and marrying somebody from within the church, but I think it was probably more Methodist hierarchy than it was local, because everybody kind of liked him. Everybody kind of liked the Mannings, and really sort of a dynamic young man. So.
What about John Sessoms?
Oh man, alive! That man had more energy than an ant going 50 miles an hour. Okay, John Sessoms was great. He was of course, he was the last one before I went off to college, and just a very eager beaver. Of course, I kept ties. Not ties, but I've known John after that. When he went back to the Murfreesboro district later on. But just a ball of energy and a fireball, and loved him to death.
Let's see the book. Any one particular thing he did?
No, not really, because that was in my younger years. You think when pastors change, they always change a little something different, but I don't think it was any drastic, except he was a well-liked pastor, okay?
How about Roy West?
So I wasn't here during the West era, okay? The West era, the latter part or the Matlock, I don't really know.
He came back with Jim Beasley.
Came back with Jim Beasley.
What do you remember about Jim?
Don't ever hit a tennis ball and get an ace on him, or he'll get you back. Okay. Jim and I got along great. I don't know what you would say accomplishments with Jim, but he was a very competent person and friendly and likable. But he could get you with a tennis ball.
How about Hawkins Clark?
Hawkins had his struggles here, okay, and I don't know what they were, Skip, because I was just getting back into the thing and from school, and Hawkins I had no problem with Hawkins, but there were some problems with Hawkins. Every Methodist church you know of runs through problems with different preachers and so forth, different ideas and so forth. And we were an older member church during that period of time. Something we have gotten out of at this point in time. But,
I know Hawkins has been successful. He just struggled when he was here.
Yeah, that's right.
What else about Vin do you remember? Vin Walker?
Vin was one of the kids that we grew up knowing, okay? Going to school and so forth. One of those people that... I guess I can say the same about myself, and so I say this. I never thought I'd be doing anything with the district or the conference or going out into different churches. We knew Vin's dad was a preacher, but you've always heard that story about preacher's son. He had a little bit of devilment in him, but it turned out to be a very inspirational thing for him. And when he got to Wesley and then came over here, he knew both sides. He knew his dad's side, the older part, and he knew the Wesley side of it, the younger part, and he just was a great fit here.
How about Carlton Thaxton?
Carlton, I don't really remember a lot about Carlton other than the fact that I didn't have any problems with him. He was a little bit more administratively different than the others, but I know Carlton more since he left than before, while he was here necessarily.
John Michael Jones.
John Michael Jones made sure that if you didn't hear the sermon in the first 15 minutes, you heard it in the second 15 minutes. Okay? And I told him he could quit at 15 minutes because that's all the attention span goes, and he never changed. It just his own way. He's going to do things his own way. One of the things that John Michael did in this church that was he really started Bible study strongly, because he was really a Bible theologian. And in those years and the years that came along in your early years, Bible study groups became very instrumental. And I think he led the first two or so.
Talking about disciple?
Something like disciple. I don't think it was disciple. It may have been disciple at the time, but I'm not sure. You know, I'm not sure when disciple was written.
It was in process at that point.
Then yes, that was probably he was teaching disciple 1 to people.
Paul Gardner.
Paul and I were just buddies. Okay. That's about the time somewhere I got to be lay leader, and I told him I didn't want to get involved. You know, I had so much going on myself in my personal life and city council and other things that I probably couldn't help him out very well. And he said, well, we'll just do what we can do. And so we worked a little more closely on certain things, church business, than probably the others. Paul was just like a buddy, kind of like Vin was a buddy. It just a good friend. Okay, one of the ones I will respect forever. And that's when the seed started growing. That's when it really started sprouting us to get the building and the church. He got a dynamic person, although sometimes I'd like to shoot him, Pete Napolitano, to head up. You know, it took somebody like Pete with no nerve to head up a building committee, and it got pushed through to build the CLC and make the changes in here, and you know, that's where it really came in, was when Paul got here. So that was working, more or less.
Now, I understand your dad was the first lay leader of the church.
I saw that. I didn't remember that. Dad was very involved with 2 different groups, and I can't remember this. A civic group. I don't think it was the Lions Club. It was something else, and the Laity Club. I would go to some of the Laity Club meetings with him at times, although I'm not as big in the Laity Club, although I ought to be. But he was very involved with the Laity Club. He and Evans Cruz and Howard Bell and some of those people would always go to the Laity meetings every month. And so I think that's probably how he did that. And that's that and working with the Sunday school. Those were his 2 favorite things as far as the church goes.
I noticed that you became lay leader in 1993 and went to 2003. That's 11 years. You have the longest tenure as lay leader of the church.
Did not realize that. I was the lay leader for quite a while.
And you're the assistant lay leader right now.
When you came here, I was lay leader, wasn't I?
It says Charlie Yarborough was lay leader at that point. You may have been that first couple of years.
I think that first year or so, and to be truthful with you, Skip, it was just an involving of different things to be involved in and so forth. Honestly, I think when Paul got here and then with you, it was working into doing what a lay leader's supposed to do, okay? And that's, monitor things, meet, work with the district, work with the different things, and to keep the ties. So the first several years of lay leader, it was more like a position as opposed to doing anything. You got a discipline, or you got a book that says what the lay leader do. I think you gave one finally to Nelson, what the lay leader's supposed to do. But it just be involved, lead different. If there's something coming up about building or something coming up about this, getting involved in that.
I've noticed that we had 14 choir directors from 1954 to 1982. And then we've had one since 1982.
Yeah.
How have you seen Kathy Bearden grow as a choir director?
How you did what?
How have you seen her change through the years as a choir director?
Kathy's Kathy, okay? And bless her heart, she loves it. Excuse me. I think she's become more spiritual in her situation. She was young. She married David Bearden, and the Beardens were in the church, and it was a good fit. It still is a good fit. I think she's become more spiritual and more leaning to some of the older type gospel music and livening things up, picking tempos up. Choirs, bless their souls, tend to get into the old book, and when Cokesbury went away, pretty much, you got into the hymns. And remember that some of the old Cokesbury hymns were pretty lively, and so I think spiritually is their development. We weren't able to keep a choir director very long, most times, but
yeah, I noticed that you had 3 the first year.
Yeah, and I don't know really the reason why. We had some ties with the college, with George Grice and some of the organists that came out here to, would help us out because of the music program at Austin P. But then, what's her name? From Northwest High School. Carolyn Riggins. And, she was tied to education, etc. So, we got a lot of help from Austin P in that sense of having our music program.
She actually hired Kathy as the organist at that time.
Yes.
79.
Yeah.
So Kathy's really been working here since 79.
I knew it was a long time. And,
she became choir director in 82. Wow.
Yeah. She and Larry, two of the stalwarts of this church. So.
Yeah, we had 2, 4, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 organists for 32 years, and Larry has been here since 88, so that makes it 26 years.
Yeah. That's very interesting because Larry is now married to an old Maddox, and she goes in very strong with Madison Street. But he's been coming out here ever since. So.
Right. Tell us about the history behind the parsonage. I remember that y'all made a decision a few years back to not to renovate, but to build a new parsonage. Tell us about that decision.
Good, because I couldn't tell you about the first one when we first bought it. It was a good deal. And it really boiled down to a basic concept of real estate. I forgot who was the motivator on that. Somebody else came up with the idea because the church, where the parsonage was in an area that was not growing very, very much at the time. It was an older neighborhood. It was the Beach Haven area. It was getting to be an older house, and Burchett's and Jeff Bibb and several others took a hard look at it. Do we want to just go ahead and move to a different area and build? And we weren't going to gain any more value in that parsonage if we had to ever sell it. And a pastor, and of course Paul had 4 of them in the group, and it was very hard for a family of 4 because it was that much smaller. And so that group put together an idea to build another house. Eddie Burchett said he would do it and, give us some break on costs and so forth. So that decision was made to sell that parsonage while it had a good price on it, and turn around and put that money into something new and something we could build with later on.
As I understand it, he gave the land because he's developed that subdivision.
I don't remember. That may be true.
He built it at cost. We have like a $250,000 house that cost $81,000 to the church.
I don't know the exact. I was thinking somebody said it would end up costing us about $95,000. But yes, a $200-something house was built extremely cheaply, and not cheaply, at a much discount, huh? Inexpensively. Great move. That parsonage now is what? When was it built?
2002.
So it's already 12 years old. Okay.
12 years old.
Yeah.
What have you seen through the youth group through the years? How have you seen that develop?
The early years we were kind of sketchy. We had youth group and we met. Excuse me. And we we'd meet as a group. We were pretty small in the early years. Towards the latter part of the 50s, there was an ecumenical group in Clarksville that went non-denominational, where a bunch of us were involved with, that were using activities countywide or citywide mostly. So you had a larger group. You could do things like hold not dances, but bring in speakers. Bill Wade was one of the speakers they brought in one time, and so we could accomplish a little bit more for a little bit, a lot different people. And of course, then I left. Okay, and then other than coming back in '71, didn't get a lot involved in the youth at that time. When I first came back, I didn't really get back into the youth until my kids got old enough. And then later on, we started a youth softball team when Karen and Eric got a little bit older. One of the fond memories I have is we took a youth softball team to Dixon for the district, for the whole thing. And of course, we were not very good, but we got to the finals that day with 7 people. We lost. We had Bruce Meyer's son got hurt. Joe. Who else got hurt? A couple others got hurt. Somebody had to leave, and we played a softball game against a very strong team. And boy, they got mad at us because we were walking their best hitters, and we hung in for a few innings before they clobbered us. But we had a great time. The kids were just great. Karen, Eric, the Binkley boys. Who else? Joe Myers was there. We were having him catch or something because he couldn't hardly. He had a hurt leg, and so we were involved more on a district level at that period of time than we are, I think, right now. There was a very strong district UMYF at the time, and we would go to meetings. I really don't know whether we still do that or not, Skip. But we were more at that time connecting with the other churches. I think I don't see that as happening right now, but it may or may not be that I'm not seeing. And maybe that would be one thing that would help out. I think Jody has gone to some of the other churches and trying to make some ties to other groups and so forth, and which I'm glad to see.
How have you seen worship change these last 60 years?
That's a tough question. To be truthful, other than schedule or order of worship, okay, it's not really changed that much, okay? Different preachers have different orders of worship. Different preachers have ideas about their order of worship, which is no problem. I guess we've probably gone a little bit more in the last, with Paul and you, at mixing in some of the contemporary with the older. Okay, now we got the contemporary service, but other than the contemporary service and the move over to more non-traditional or contemporary Christian music, it's pretty much the same.
The screen.
Oh, the screen. Well, I guess that's kind of gotten to the, other churches use it a lot. Okay, we use it some. Some use it some use it. Some put every song up there so the older people like me can see it in big letters and not have to look down at a hymnal. Okay, we had trouble with that, if you remember. People just wanting to change, but change brings on different ideas. Okay, and that's one of the things I think is great about Hilldale. We had an older members in the congregation. Now it's turned to where it's gotten a little younger, and we're not an old person church anymore. We're more to the middle to younger than we were, and be truthful with you, most of us older people are just, there are not many of us anymore. How many, you said there are, 4 of us still left?
No, there are 5.
There's 5?
5, possibly 6. We're trying to find one person.
Well, let's see. There's Gary Ezel, myself. My brother is still not he's not a member, but Minerva Harris.
Alice Goodrich.
Forgot about Alice because she's incapacitated. Let's see.
Bill Smith.
I thought Bill and Robert Rowland, Bobby, I thought they were deceased.
No, Bill is still alive.
Is he?
It's Roland that we don't know about.
I think Robert Rowland Smith was Bobby, and he died last year. I think. I told the girls that the other day, or told Nell. I thought he had died. Bobby was Bill's son. Linda Alford was Bill's son, who used to be part of C&M Supply Company. I honestly, of course, Bobby graduated with me, and I think they put out that he was deceased last year. I didn't know Bill was. Bill still alive?
We take communion to him.
Wow, he's got to be 90 years old.
He is. He's 90-something.
Yeah.
He's still very alert. Just physically can't get around.
Yeah, he started C&M Supply and then turned it over to his daughter and his son-in-law, and they've been running it for years. Well, now they're even out of it now. I think they retired and turned it over to their son.
It's turned over. I don't know if it still exists or doesn't.
I don't know. I don't really know.
Lay speakers has become a big thing here. Tell us about the origin of that and how it got developed and all.
Laity speakers was something that I think grew out of the Methodist hierarchy. I don't know exactly when. I know it grew out before I ever got involved in it, and so it had to be the 90s, late 90s, late 80s, early 90s.
Well, it's been around for longer than that.
Yeah.
I just talk about involvement here at the church.
Well, it kind of started with the early years of Paul. When Paul talked Bruce into going to the lay speaking school that was taught here by the district, and then Bruce, how Bruce gets me into things I don't want to get in sometimes, and so I went with Bruce, and that kind of evolved. I think we got eight or nine lay speakers here in the church,
at least,
maybe more. Yeah, and it has grown. The Clarksville district now has well over 100 lay speakers to service these churches. And the idea is we don't have enough clergy that are fully ordained to cover churches anymore. And so when one of these supply pastors has to leave, some of the surrounding churches don't really have lay speakers to pick up and go to the pulpit. So it's grown in the sense we have gone where we will take the place of a pastor in a pulpit. Pat Martin, took a church. Beverly Dykes, took a church. There's some that, have really gone. Denise Skidmore has gone all over the district with the fuel and herself as a lay speaker. Bruce has been all over the district, plus some. And I haven't been as much lately because of the district lay leader situation, where I have to go to different places at different times, so I haven't gone to the pulpit as much as I used to. But could you believe that how shocked my mother was when I did the first time here at Hilldale? I was not the epitome of somebody that she thought she had ever seen in a pulpit. And yet, Skip, she's the one, when she was going through those troubles with her and Dad, that really, made me decide there's something else here that I can do. And
you talking about when your dad was ill?
Pardon?
You're talking about when your dad was ill?
When Mom, of course, we always thought Dad, he was handicapped in a chair, and we always thought he would die before Mom. Well, then Mom developed cancer, and she died before Dad, and she kind of handled the finances in the family, and because I was local, she dumped that kind of on me, and I shouldn't say dump. That's the ordinary course of human life, okay? And so, quite truthfully, may not tell this without tearing up a little bit. Walk into that house, and you'd see her with her Bible open. She always had Bible things. She was the greatest cook. She was here when the church doors were open, and sometimes when it was closed. And it didn't hit me until that she was finding some sort of strength to get through all that. It didn't really hit me where she was getting it. Okay, and that's when I decided I'd go do the lay speaking stuff and do some other things. Okay.
Something that's affected the church a lot, or influenced the church a lot, has been the walk to Emmaus. Tell about that.
I'm not as involved with that. It was a great weekend. What was the famous words? Don't anticipate. Well, being a lawyer and an engineer, what am I getting into? And I worried you to death about that. And I was going to hit you when you didn't tell me anything, but that's all right. It was a great weekend. It was great to see that other people had the same problems and concerns that you had, and the great beliefs that you had. The hardest thing that Bruce Meyer said one time, we are too often sitting in our pews forgetting to tell people how we feel about Christ. And so it was a great weekend. Bruce and I went together, and I got to pick on Bruce and he got to pick on me. We had a great time, wonderful experience. I don't know of maybe a couple of people that I've ever heard of that didn't find that an enlightening experience, because you do it with people that just like yourself. And, I would encourage everybody to do it. Too often it's felt like it was kind of a cult activity, because you keep some of the significant features of it I won't say in the dark, but hidden until you go through it. So you see it when you go through it, not through somebody else's eyes. And
but I'm talking about, what's the influence on the church? We've had over 100 people go through it.
I think, those people that have gone through it participate a lot more. They take part in what they do and helping people and working in the church. It just puts that kind of emphasis on it. My wife, I'll say this, she's done a lot of this, okay? One of the great experiences we had was when we did the first face-to-face. Well, actually, it was the second face-to-face. The first pilot was at Franklin First, wasn't it? And we both got to do that walk together, and with a great bunch of people, you and David and BJ and some very strong people, and and working with people that are 60 and over. Of course, we were 60 and over, but those people, just when you see them and work with them, have got to go back to the church and help that church. Maybe they don't get other people to go to Emmaus all that often sometimes, or face to face. But if you look around, those people that have been to Emmaus are your people that do things in this church. And that is what the goal is to help you and help others, be a part of the church that they're a member of. And I think it's really helped. Too long?
Through the years, has there been anything else that has been really a big influence in the life of the church? I mean, we talked about that, we talked about fuel. Anything else that's been a major influence that you can think of?
Wow. When we say from a spiritual standpoint, I think that we've pretty much maintained the spirituality of the portion of it. I think we've probably grown from the time with Vin to the time that we are through Paul and you, where we realized that in order to maintain Hilldale, we could stay as a quaint little church, but if we're going to really meet our goal in our profession in life, then we needed to expand, and we expanded first by buying that first lot over there. We expanded in the second thing by buying those two houses, and if we could have just come up with $1 million, we'd have had the IHOP corner, but that's kind of tough for us. Originally, then going back this way, I think all of us in the back, some of us fought it because of the money that was being asked, okay? And I thought it was more, I thought it just wasn't worth the price that we would see out of it. It may be 30, 40 years down the road, but, and ultimately, it came down. It came to us, and we acted and acted pretty good, I think. We have it. It's not paying totally for itself, but it's paying most of it. And over the next 5 years, the expansion. So we're from that street to IHOP now. We've moved into an era where we know that we had to have space. Each preacher has a different spirituality factor. Each preacher has a different approach. But the thing about a Methodist preacher is they got to learn to adapt just like we do, okay? And you got to adapt to your congregation. Paul adapted because he was a little bit towards the older ones and moving in that direction. You come in here and you've adapted to move into the younger area. And so I think that's the biggest change. And the biggest thing about Hilldale is we are trying to adapt, and we are adapting.
What was it like that first Sunday you moved into the Christian Life Center?
Wow. It was fantastic, okay? It was fantastic. Although it hasn't really fulfilled what we thought was the basketball court and so forth. But if you notice also that the district and the different places have gone away from the basketball league somewhat. But walking into that building and seeing that and what it could do for us was great. One of these days, and maybe not in your lifetime or my lifetime, and I say lifetime, not tenure, okay? We will see something else here. And we'll see a building that will handle 400 or 500 people, handle all the classrooms that we need. Maybe then 60 years down the road, it'll have to build again. So,
you were here on the 50th anniversary. What do you remember about the 50th anniversary?
Oh, some of the stories they told about us. It was just a celebration. It was people that got to say thank you, and it's been great. A celebration is a celebration, and you got to remember we had a 50th. I think we had a pretty good crowd. Was it 50th or the 40th? That we had a real good crowd back. Okay, it may have been the 40th that we had a huge crowd of people coming back. How many of you been through? You've been through several homecomings on a yearly basis.
I started homecoming.
Okay, you weren't here for the 50th work. No.
Paul was here at 50th. I came a year later.
Okay. I think it was probably the 50th where a good many of the people came back, pastors and everybody, and it was just a good get together and say hello and so forth. We still have some of our old pastors still preaching. They're still working churches and so forth. I'm just trying to remember who isn't. John Michael's still in the pulpit. Paul's still in the pulpit. I think Jim Beasley's retired, isn't he?
Yeah. Paul, John Michael, and I are the only three pastors in a pulpit until the summer.
Okay. Well, that's still. But Vin's retired. I forget. Vin's retired. But that doesn't mean you're not going to be in a pulpit somewhere. Okay. I think Vin, when he left being a normal pastor at a church, went into the foundation, and he did go to a lot of different churches, trying to develop our financial program for the conference, and which it's great. We're probably in as good a shape as any conference around here right now as far as our money goes, and we were able to reduce the budget this year from the conference spending money. And anytime you can reduce a budget, you take away from what a church has to individually pay.
What do you envision in the future? What's the immediate need? What's the long range need?
Our immediate need is to get our debt paid off and then move into the first phase on rebuilding here. Okay. The total implementation of the 3 phases, I'm 71. I don't know that I'll see it all, but that's a big step. That's that's a $11 billion step. I laughed at Lynn Hill at Franklin when he committed for something like $30 million. Well, I took a trip with him and he said, "Well, I'm gonna bankrupt the church, $30 million or something like that." Yeah, it is, and we're gonna get there. But we can fuss about all the teams that we've had this last 2 years. Okay, people dying, people leaving, and it wasn't people leaving the church altogether, just so forth. It was people leaving to go someplace else.
To move away from town.
To move away from town and going to another church, not leaving the church. Okay, when you lose a couple of your biggest contributors, that hurts. We're small in that respect, but we're larger than a lot of others, and but we'll get there. We'll get there, and the next thing I see is paying off the debt.
We have 1 more minute. Do you have any last thoughts you want to share?
When you see something start, when you see something born, and you don't really know at the time just where it will go or what will happen, and all the different changes and all the different evolutions over the years, it's got to make you proud of where we stand today. Okay. I'm not saying that we don't have differences and problems and so forth, but we've worked our way through all of those, and we will work our way through those again. You got to, as the song says, you got a firm foundation, and we will work it through, and things will work out. We still have a bunch of younger, old people with visions and ideas. Some of those in 15 or 20 years younger than I am, that still really feel like Hilldale's their home. Like that song Kathy wrote, "Hilldale is my home." That's not misunderstanding that God's church is every church, but it's everybody's got to have a place to go and a fit and a niche. And looking back over 60 years, you got to be proud. I think my mom and dad would be proud. I think the Bibbs would be proud. I think the Goodriches would be proud. I think Dr. Grice, who unfortunately lost his life early in the process, would have been proud. Lewis Johnson Sr. would have been proud of his wife, Sue. Whether they knew in their own minds that this was what would happen, they would have to be proud.